Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is an overview of our IBM Endpoint Manager Patch Management Solution. This is a system that's stood up and supported by ITS, formerly known as BigFix, and then it was known as Tavali Endpoint Manager, and now it's IBM Endpoint Manager. I'm assuming most of you were familiar with the BigFix instance we had that I believe it was kind of like a beta version or a pilot that we had previously. Quick question out to everybody. Is everybody familiar with BigFix?
Sure. I've worked with it.
Okay. Klaus, are you familiar with BigFix at all? Okay. So as long as you're familiar with it, that's just I'm trying to get an idea of if people have actually seen it before or not, or heard of it, or dealt with it. In any case, I'm going to just kind of overview this. Thanks for your responses. So BigFix is, once again, it's a patch manager solution that covers just about all the major platforms, or for sure all the major platforms, all the various Windows versions, all the various OS X versions, as well as Linux, Unix, and some kind of oddball ones as well. In particular, like Xena, Linux, and so forth. It does cover Solaris, but I know and at least in our environment, we're trying to get rid of Solaris, trying to, do as much as we can to clean up those servers. I'm not sure if your area has actually Solaris boxes, but that may not be relevant to you. Just giving an idea of what it actually encompasses in terms of patches. It also covers some third-party application support, Adobe, in particular Java. I'm going to mute you guys, if you don't mind. So hopefully everybody can see my diagram here. I'm going to start talking about that. It's basically the way it works is every machine needs to have the agent running on it, the BS client running. The client takes about 2% or less CPU, and 2% being the max that it uses when it's actually processing the patches that are going to be applied to it. I'll just show you that quickly here on my machine. If you go under Task Manager, Processes, it's going to be called BS Client UI, using very little memory. CPU is up pretty much 0. This, once again, it spikes when it's actually checking relevance against the deployments that you push out to all your machines. It'll spike to 2%. That can be throttled, but we recommend that folks leave it as is for right now, especially when you're first getting started. And later, when you get really comfortable with the tool, then you go ahead and start throttling that. Obviously, you don't want to keep that at a high CPU usage level, since we want to make sure that our customers can access the other applications. Once you get the agent installed from a delegated administrator's point of view, in other words, folks here on this call, you want to make sure you get the console installed. After this session, I'm going to be providing access to this share if you already don't have it. And in this share, you can see the console is right there. You can just double click on it, execute it. As well as if you need to reinstall the client because it doesn't get pushed out through the Academic Technology GPO, or if it's a Mac machine, the Mac installer packages here. As well as there's the MSI here that I also place here so that when I upgrade the servers, there's an updated MSI that you can deploy to your environment. In our environment, I make sure and always update it with the latest version. These files are not generated until I actually upgrade the server, then those are generated. So there may be at least 1 or 2 releases behind. Just keep that in mind for this share. In addition, in this share, I have a quick README file that talks about all the different installers and what they're used for. Also, I placed some PDF guides on console operators. So the console operator meaning the console itself, which I'll just briefly show you right now. I'll be covering it here in a little bit. This is what the console looks like. So the console operators guide talks about all the different areas within the console, how to use the console, and so forth. Let me go back to my share view here. There's also a Nix installer, which is a tool that you install on a Windows machine, and it allows you to deploy out to Unix, Linux, and OS X. And it walks you through a little wizard. When you deploy the OS X version of this utility, you have to make sure that the package, when you actually launch it on the OS X machine, you have to make sure that this masthead file is in the same directory as the OS X package, and also you have to rename this masthead to action site and just leave the .afxm extension there. If you don't do that, it'll install the service, it'll show up on OS X, but the client itself actually will not report back to the console. And if that's the case, all you have to do is just make sure you copy this masthead, rename it to action site, and then relaunch the package and reinstall it.
This is Klaus. DC, would you recommend then that we copy these files first to the computer before installing? Because you don't want us to rename it right here in the shared drive.
You won't be able to rename it in the share. It's a read-only access.
Okay.
So you're going to have to copy it locally to that machine. That's a good question. Yeah, so I failed to mention that the file share access is the read-only, so you can copy them as many, you can copy the whole structure if you like. We don't care about that. We prefer for you to have access to the files, which is, yeah, it's read-only. Also for debugging the machines, and this gets kind of into more advanced topics, there is what is known as a fix-it debugger. It allows you to test relevance. The fix-it debugger executable is here. I'll be covering that in a different session if folks need to go into that. And I have also an archive installers, which really are, for the most part, are not really necessary. I just keep them there just in case there might be some issues in the future. And it might be necessary for you to install the old version first. As well as I have some training PDFs here that there are some student exercises that were from a class that I took, and they're specific to that environment, but you can go ahead and read through those and kind of get an understanding of what it's like to work with relevance within IBM Endpoint Manager, as well as the actual exercises PDF actually has examples of what the relevance language does and how you would execute some of those tasks. So I'm going to stop right here real quick. Any questions on any of this?
This is Klaus. I think at the beginning you said Big Fix is the old name, but now you're showing us Big Fix installers.
They didn't change. They didn't update a lot of the naming in their packages.
Okay.
That's an IBM. They decided to keep it for whatever reason. So yes, you'll still see like I showed you in the processes under this machine. You'll still see it as BS client, as opposed to whatever they would call it, IES, I guess IEM or whatever. And as well as the packages themselves are still called Big Fix. But in reality, the product itself right now, if you go to their websites, they're starting to change it to IBM Endpoint Manager or IEM. I refer to it as IEM since, for the most part, outside of the packages themselves, just about everything is IEM.
Could you show what you have in that BES OS 10 installer folder again?
Sure.
Okay. So, would it be possible just to go ahead and add the that masthead file renamed into that as you have it there, so we could just copy that out and
yeah, I can do that.
Action site. And
I can do that. Oh, whoops.
Yeah. There we go.
Good point.
That way, then we don't get confused. Wait, I forgot the action site. Oh.
Yeah. I didn't want to confuse it because people can mix them up between Windows and OS X. So that's the reason why I hadn't done it yet. That's more of it's a manual process for OS X at this point.
Sure.
But that's fine. Not a big deal. Hopefully that'll make it easier for everybody. Okay, so going back to what I was mentioning, so you have the agent installed on your machine. You can, once again, go to the share. Just go ahead and launch it from here, copy it to the machine. It doesn't matter. If you launch it from here on the Windows side, the masthead is here, so it's going to go ahead and report to the console. Otherwise, if you decide to download it, make sure you download the masthead. It doesn't have to be renamed for Windows. It only has to be renamed for OS X, which, thanks to Jason here, I've already set that up for you. So you can just copy the package and the action site locally to the OS X machine, and you can launch it, and you'll be good to go. Once that's done, you can either manually launch the console on your administrative machine. The console does take 1.5 gigs of RAM to run on average. The first time it loads, it takes quite a bit of time, potentially 30 or 40 minutes. It has to load all the site data. There is a setting in there that I can work with everybody on where you can actually make it where it caches most of that. So if you leave it running, it doesn't take forever for it to load the next time it launches. And where you want to do that is under File, Preferences, and you want to go under the caching area. You want to say Keep Full Cache on Disk, and you want to say Conservative. Keep the data for as long as possible. Click OK, leave everything else the same. Go ahead and close the console out and then relaunch it for those settings to take place. And as long as you leave it running most of the time, it should be about 30 seconds to a minute for it to load. Sometimes even as low as 20 seconds, just depending on how much of the cache needs to be updated. So at that point, you'll have the console installed. Within your view, you won't see all the sites that I see, but you'll be able to see ATS, as well as we're going to also give you access to SGSU. The SGSU site is used for us to provide a read access to all the console operators we've delegated access to, as well as in the future when we start pushing out baselines, which we've already actually started already with a CSU mandate for the CSU folder. We want to make sure that all of the other sites we have delegated access to, we want to make sure they can read this site. So as